Thank you for joining us today. I am Heath Henning, and this is Truth Watchers Podcast. Here we have a focus on apologetics and expository teaching, so we can uphold the words of 3 John verse 4. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. Also, check us out on truthwatchers.com, where there is a lot more material available, especially on the topic. We're continuing our discussion about Michael Heiser and his Neo-Gnostic heresy. On the website, truthwatchers.com, I have 6 articles entitled Michael Heiser's Gnostic Heresy. I also have recently published my book, which is out now, The Unbiblical Realm, Refuting the Divine Counsel of Michael Heiser's Deuteronomy 32 Worldview. This book has 332 pages and over 2,000 footnotes documenting what Heiser is teaching and refuting it, with overwhelming amount of these footnotes referencing ancient literature, because Heiser's claim of scholarship was with ancient literature and the Hebrew language, which I show from the ancient literature that, and from the Hebrew language from that matter, that the guy was a liar. He either lied about what this ancient literature and the Hebrew language taught, or he lied about reading the ancient literature. I don't doubt he actually did know Hebrew. He did. He was a Hebrew scholar. But he lied about redefining words that don't have suitable definitions that he said they did. All right. And I don't want to make a false dichotomy. So there is another option, not just those two. He definitely was a liar. But the third option is he just had such incredibly bad hermeneutics. He was utterly ignorant about reality of what the Bible and what these ancient texts actually taught. I don't believe that's the case, because I document even in my book some altered quotations. He quotes and cites the reference, and he's not even quoting the reference. He's not even quoting the source right. So he alters things. He lies. Okay, he's caught red-handed, and I document that in my book. All right, but first, I want to give an overview of Heiser's view, his theology. All right, if you didn't catch the last episode, and that explained this in a nutshell. Okay, his view is that God, who he calls Yahweh, but the proper pronunciation is Yehovah, or as we would say in English, Jehovah. All right, but Heiser's view of God, he created minor gods, lesser gods. He calls them sons of God, because he is heavily influenced by the pagan literature of the Ugaritic literature, which is the culture that we read about when we read about Baal and Ashtaroth in the Bible. With this concept that he's teaching, clearly polytheistic, but yet he claims that he's not a polytheist. How does he do this? How can he say such things? First of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that he strictly denied monotheism. In his article entitled Monotheism, Polytheism, Monolatry, or Henotheism, toward an assessment of divine plurality in the Hebrew Bible. That's the title of this article, and we'll quote a few references throughout this book, throughout this episode, just calling it his article on monotheism. It was published in 2008 for the Bulletin of Biblical Research. I believe that is Liberty University's theological journal. All right, Liberty University is accepting this kind of trash. All right, but in his article on monotheism, he writes, he blatantly rejects monotheism from the Bible. He writes, quote, "Monotheism as it is currently understood means that no other gods exist. This term is inadequate for describing Israelite religion, but suggesting it be done away with would no doubt cause considerable consternation among certain parts of the academic community, not to mention the interested laity," unquote. So he says the Bible, what he refers to in this quote, Israelite religion, is not monotheistic. Now, his doctoral dissertation, which he wrote for his PhD at Madison University, a communist college, it was on the topic of this divine plurality. And basically what he was writing was supposedly refuting the liberal view that when Israel went into captivity, the Babylonian captivity, they evolved out of polytheism. They were originally a polytheistic religion. And when they went into Babylonian captivity, they came out monotheistic. And Heiser is rejecting this liberal view for what? A more liberaler view. What he was teaching and what he taught in his dissertation and through all his books and articles is that Israel remained polytheistic after the Babylonian captivity into the Second Temple period. Second Temple period is from Ezra and Nehemiah building the Second Temple all the way until its destruction in 70 AD. So that would include the New Testament and all the literature, Jewish literature, that is intertestamental period. All right? And so he's saying that it was finally in the rabbinic era, which is like the composition of the Mishnah in the 2nd century, that Israel, the Israelite religion, finally purged this plurality of divine beings out of their thinking. All right. So there's a major problem with the concept is essentially if the Second Temple period remained teaching a divine plurality, why did the rabbinic period all of a sudden change theologically? All right. If you read the Mishnah or any rabbinic text, ancient rabbinic literature, you realize they were steeped in tradition. Okay, so for example, in the Mishnah, Sanhedrin 11:4 states, quote, greater stringency applies to the observance of the words of the scribes than to the observance of the words of the written law, unquote. So they're more stringent to quote rabbis than the Bible itself. That's literally what the Mishnah taught. A rabbi was expected to, quote, retell exactly what he has heard and reports a thing in the name of him that said it, unquote. That's Mishnah, Aboth 6:6. In other words, if you pick up any random page of the Mishnah, flip it open and read it. It says, Rabbi so-and-so says in the name of Rabbi so-and-so. That's how they quoted it. And that's also why, you read the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5-7, it closes, and chapter 7 closes with all the people being astonished. Why? Because he taught with authority and not like the scribes. Okay, he didn't say Rabbi so-and-so said Rabbi so-and-so. He said, you have heard it said, but I say unto you. All right. Throughout John and all the Gospels, verily I say unto you. In John, he says it twice, verily, verily I say unto you. Okay, he spoke with authority of his own authority. In fact, in the Old Testament, the prophet said, thus saith the Lord. Jesus didn't say, thus saith the Lord, because he wasn't a mere prophet. He was God incarnate. He said, verily I say unto you. All right, so they were astonished by his teaching and his authority. But this is where the issue with Heiser comes. Why would rabbinic theology suddenly change their doctrine if they prided themselves for diligently protecting earlier rabbinic teaching with such obsessive dependence on earlier traditions? They would not have purged this rabbinic theology out. They would not have purged these traditions out. That's baloney. Okay, it wouldn't happen. Anyways, going back to the concept of Heiser being a polytheist, that's what we're going to be focusing on in this episode. He denies the term polytheism. for his theological system. He likes the word divine plurality. All right, but what is divine plurality? It's a plurality of divine beings. Let's define it. Plurality means many or more than one. Divine beings are gods. So divine plurality means many gods, more than one God. That's why he rejects monotheism. What does polytheism mean? Poly is the Greek word for many. Theism means a belief in God. So polytheism is a belief in many gods. What is the difference between a divine plurality and polytheism? There is no difference. In fact, if you read Heiser's work, okay, he's written a lot, and I've read over 2,000 pages of his material. But in every single article and book that I've read of him, he quotes a book, Dictionary of Deities and Demons in the Bible. Okay, this Heiser frequently references in practically all of his writings, probably all of his works, definitely all that I've read, in this dictionary that he is very dependent on, is a very liberal piece of trash. Under the entry of God, the word Elohim in Hebrew, it refers to Egypt's theology as polytheistic and uses the term divine plurality as synonymous to describe Egypt's polytheistic religious thought. Furthermore, this favored dictionary of Heiser expresses the perspective of opposing the terms monotheism to properly depict the Bible. It states, quote, only when the subordinate deities are degraded to angels created by God they serve, can one speak of monotheism, unquote. So Heiser thinks rabbinic Judaism and historical Christianity had downgraded these, quote, gods that he refers to into angels to promote monotheism, which he would say is not biblical. Okay, that's literally what's going on. He rejects monotheism. His podcast, the Naked Bible Podcast, was named that because he's stripping theology, Christian theology, traditional theology out of the Bible to give the bare facts of the Bible. But what's he doing? He's interpreting the Bible through pagan literature. He's producing Neo-Gnosticism. Heiser argues in his article on monotheism, quote, it is not difficult to demonstrate that the Hebrew Bible assumes and affirms the existence of other gods. The textbook passage is Psalm 82, unquote. Yes, he is teaching multiple gods exist very blatantly. This is not hard to understand. In his book, The Unseen Realm, page 11, all right, this is what he says. The God, quote, the God of the Old Testament was part of an assembly, pantheon of other gods, unquote. You heard that. That's literally word for word, verbatim, what he says. The God of the Old Testament was part of an assembly, pantheon of other gods. Okay, this is polytheism. Why can't people figure this out? Why can't people figure out that Heiser is teaching polytheism? It's crystal clear. There's no doubt this is what he's teaching. All right. How does he get away with this and somehow fall under the radar of numerous apologists that are eager to interview him? Well, for one, you got the good old boys club of Christian apologetics. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. You endorse my book, I'll endorse yours. And we ride each other's coattails to fame. Yeehaw, let's get on this train. All right, that's very common. But an apologist should be defending the faith, not trying to get fame. That's a problem. But two, the way Heiser is confusing people is by redefining the word Elohim to allegedly the meaning is disembodiment or disembodied. In my book, The Unbiblical Realm, I have an entire chapter dealing with this. And I assess multitudes of Hebrew lexicons to identify the fact that Michael Heiser is making up a definition out of thin air. There's not any Hebrew lexicon that justifies his basis for redefining the word Elohim. The definition Heiser concocts for his theological scheme is present in his article, which, again, the monotheistic article, quote, in briefest terms, an Elohim is a being whose proper habitation is considered the spirit world, and whose primary existence was a disembodied one, unquote. So he's saying the word Elohim simply means spirit. That's what he's saying. In his book, The Unseen Realm, page 29, he says, quote, humans are also not by nature disembodied. The word Elohim is a place of residence term. Our home is a world of embodiment. Elohim by nature inhabit the spiritual world, unquote. All right. So the problem is, even in his own writing, he documents where in the Bible the word Elohim is applied to man. Okay, and it's applied by man to men all throughout the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, even ancient Jewish literature. So, and I document all of this. Like I said, there's over 2,000 footnotes, primarily from ancient literature, ancient Jewish literature, to expose his lies. But with a definition like that, you got a lot of Christian apologists that are saying, well, it kind of sounds like Mormonism, but, you know, if he's just saying a God is a spirit, then there's no problem with this. So I tried to, they ignored me, but the website crossexamine.org, this is the website of Frank Turek, the Christian apologist. If you're familiar with the book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, co-authored by Norman Geisler and Frank Turek. That's who Frank Turek is. Now, Frank Turek has a two-part interview with Michael Heiser, endorsing this guy's heresy. An article shows up on his website, March 4th, 2018, entitled Reflecting on the Divine Council. And in it, I'm going to read just a paragraph from the author where it shows their confusion about what Heiser's teaching based on his redefinition of the word Elohim being disembodied. He says, quote, to refer to angels and demons as Elohim, that is supernatural immaterial entities, isn't theologically objectionable, just as I wouldn't object to saying God is a spirit and Satan is a spirit. If the Hebrew term Elohim simply carried the same connotation as spirit, then to say that there are many gods wouldn't violate traditional monotheism any more than saying there are many spirits. There's only one God, capital G, even though there are many gods, lowercase g. There are many spirits, even though there's only one great God, unquote. And this shows up on crossexamine.org, Frank Turek's website. He didn't write it, somebody else did. But the point that I'm saying is this article goes on and talks how they were uncomfortable reading Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm, and said it seems very close to Mormonism, but concludes that his theology is exceptional because of his definition of Elohim. The problem is, as we already saw, even in that book, The Unseen Realm, he denies monotheism. Okay, and if you read his work, he's not saying that these gods are all just spirit beings, angels and demons, though he uses the word for angels and demons. He's saying there's God, a second tier of gods that are ontologically greater than angels, and thus angels are a third tier. Let's also talk about theology, and this is what I'm dumbfounded about, what people don't get. And this is why, one major reason why I call him a Gnostic. All right? Think about it. Jesus Christ was God incarnate. But wait, Heiser's defining the word God as disembodied. Did Jesus Christ walk this earth in a body? Was he God in a body? According to Heiser, he couldn't be. So Heiser falls under two issues. One, either he's a Gnostic teaching docetism, that is, that Jesus Christ didn't actually have a physical body when he walked the earth. It only seemed to. He was actually a phantom. That's how some Gnostic cults retained deity of Christ. The other option is that Jesus wasn't God when he walked the earth. Either way, Heiser's a heretic with his definition. All right? And Christian apologists are promoting and endorsing him. But just so you know, he is very much a Mormon in what he's teaching. All right? And as I expressed his teaching, all right, this concept that these gods were dispersed at the Tower of Babel, there's 70 of them. All right, I want to quote Michael Quinn, D. Michael Quinn. He was a former professor of Mormon history at Brigham Young University. He writes a book entitled Early Mormonism in the Magic World View, which thoroughly revealed that Joseph Smith's theological perspectives came from his knowledge and practice of occultism. Quinn eventually got excommunicated from the Mormon cult because he wrote this book. Now, his premise, his argument was simply, this is our history, we should embrace it. He didn't think it was bad. Quinn, to his death, claimed to be a Mormon, although he got excommunicated. But by faith, he remained Mormon. So this is a lengthier quote, and he quotes a number of other sources in it, okay? So listen to what he says. This is his book on page 299. Quote, in April 1844, Joseph Smith's King Follett discourse instructed Mormons that, quote, you have got to learn how to be gods yourself and to be kings and priests to God, the same as all gods have done before you, unquote. And 11 days before his death in June, the prophet said, quote, I wish to declare I have always and in all congregations when I have preached the subject of deity, it has been the plurality of gods, unquote. Regarding the King Follett discourse, William J. Hamblin relentlessly attacked the claims of Lance S. Owens that Joseph Smith derived the following statement from Kabbala. Quote, the head god called together the gods and sat in grand council to bring forth the world, and, unquote. And in the beginning, the head of the gods called a council of the gods, and they came together and concoct a plan to create the world and people it, unquote. Instead, Hamblin claimed that these ideas and phrasing were Smith's unique contributions, yet based on the Bible. Hamblin asserted, quote, the idea that Joseph allegedly borrowed from Kabbalism are also found in biblical texts, unquote. But this FARMS is the abbreviation for Foundation of Ancient Research and Mormon Study. But this FARMS polemicist well knows there is no biblical reference to council of gods. Contrary to Hamblin, Joseph Smith apparently borrowed this idea direct from Johann A. Eisenmenger, who wrote a book entitled Traditions of the Jews, last published in 1748. In his discussion of the 70 angels who figure so prominently in the Kabbala, Eisenmenger wrote, quote, the 70 princes are called Elohim, that is, gods. They are also called God's council, and the words go to, let us go down in their confounded language, referring to Genesis 11, the Babel dispersion portion, text, are said to have been spoken of them, unquote. Smith adopted this polytheistic use of Elohim and the concept of God's council of gods, then shifted those concepts from Eisenmenger discussion about the Tower of Babel. Does that sound like Michael Heiser's teaching what was taught in Kabbala and Joseph Smith? So if you didn't know, Heiser actually has an article written in a Mormon theological journal. They invited him to write an article for their theological journal. Okay, I would never get invited to a Mormon theological journal. Why? Because they're a cult, and I would expose their false teaching. And they would never look at my doctrines and say, that sounds like us. We can totally have him write for our journal. But Heiser, they were completely comfortable, and because they're trying to have a PR, public relations, with evangelicalism, they're trying to get close up with evangelicals. And so Heiser is a part of that, was a part of that. Yes, Heiser was a polytheist. His divine counsel is polytheism, period. And every Christian apologist should call him out as a heretic and not endorse him. All right, but we got to end this. This is Heath Henning. Thank you for joining us at Truth Watchers Podcast. For more fascinating facts, check us out at truthwatchers.com.